Here at Lake Grove Presbyterian Church, we recognize the complexity of this season and are inviting all of us to reflect on our experience of this complicated and uncertain time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Caring Conversations. It is so good to be with you today. And today we're talking about, Pastor Susan, you have a topic that you want to bring to us, and it relates to all of this re-entering that we are facing now. And so I'm just going to hand it over to you.
Oh, good morning, Lillian. Good morning, everyone, or whenever you encounter this. We're so glad that you are sharing this conversation with us and walking along through this season, which really, my goodness, the season just keeps changing and morphing a little bit, doesn't it? And as I've been reflecting about this, we are in a season now where we're kind of re-entering. Lots of people have vaccines. The In some places, the numbers of uh, the people who've contracted COVID are decreasing. And so there's a lot of re-entry and you used a word earlier, re-emerging, that people are doing. And it feels a little bit complicated and disrupted. And it is like we are all passing through new thresholds. And it can feel a little disjointed, disgruntled, discouraging, even because things keep shifting under our feet, or we're finding, oh, I'm crossing over another threshold. I don't want to do that, or I do. And so I was really reflecting on how do we keep walking through this disruption of all of these thresholds when everyone's responding a little differently to them.
Right.
I think that's one of the big challenges, and especially as a community, Lillian and I, as we serve in a church, a local congregation, and trying to help care for and nurture a group of people and crossing some new thresholds. And then as we all adapt and adjust to those differently, it can be challenging.
Mhm.
So,
I wonder if we could just name some of the thresholds that we have seen or are personally that we're crossing over into. Um, I know you mentioned, yes, in some areas the contraction rates are going down, and so praise God for that.
yes.
I've also seen in certain areas where the contraction rates are now going up, and so then you know, it's not like a clear, hey, everyone's fine, but it's an up and down. And so that up and down of numbers can cause this crossing over into thresholds even more challenging.
Mhm.
So thresholds, I mean, we both have children, and we decided, yes, that our children can go back to school.
Mhm.
What are some other thresholds that we are crossing over?
That is a great one. And doing in person, in our congregation, there is in person worship, and so gathering for that, and that's a new threshold that
Yeah,
people are crossing over into,
yeah.
and even looking at a greater ways to be connected even in social hours or things like that. And everyone feels a little bit at a different, it's almost like, you can see your foot lift up to go through a doorway. And it almost feels like your foot will hang there for a little bit as you are deciding, okay, should I go to this event? What exactly will it be like? Or no, maybe I'll pull my foot back because I'm not sure that I'm ready for that. And then there can also be the feeling of, well, of course I'm ready. Your foot is up over the threshold, already on the ground, next foot coming up and over, when perhaps the way someone else is entering to the threshold makes you pause when you really didn't want to. You wanted to keep going through that door. And I know we have all sorts of different ones of these, even from people eating out in restaurants, shopping, making travel plans to see family. It can just be really challenging as these different choices and decisions, what we're calling thresholds, come before us.
Also, returning to work is another one, I think. some people have the choice, should they go return to the office or not?
Right.
Um, and isn't that an interesting word that I just said, and I caught myself say it? Should I return to work?
Mhm.
Um, and that seems to be the question that kind of hovers. It's like that cloud. Should I do this? Should I not do this?
Yeah.
What do you think about that word, Susan?
It's really an interesting thing when we have that, we should, it's like we've got something in our mind that we know must happen, should happen. But in this season where things are just so um, wonky, for lack of a better word, or to use a different one besides disrupted, it's I think it might be better to, when we hear ourselves saying should, like, I should be ready to go back to the office. My kids should be in school full time, or my kids should stay at home. The whole church should be meeting. No, the whole church should be staying home. That maybe we pause for a moment when we hear that word come out of our mouth or into our mind and rephrase it with something like, wouldn't it be nice? Or, um, and I guess what the invitation there is to realize, to give ourselves a chance to see what's underneath this should. Because when we say, oh, I should be doing this, you might be putting extra responsibility upon yourself that you may not need to carry, of being able to get to an outcome or expect an outcome that really is not necessarily going to happen. Um,
So with that, do you mean, so I'm going to use the should I go back to work? Because that's what I said, should we? So if ask myself, should I go back to work? Or better yet, I should go back to the office. Then even in those words, I am putting a responsibility, a level of a weight to the decision that is helpful or is not helpful. Can you tease that out a little bit?
Right. I love how you said that. So I'm going to repeat it, that I
Mhm.
should go back to work. You are already saying what you think should happen. Like, I know here's what it needs to be. The challenge is underneath that. And if you're listening, I've got a hand up like it's a barrier. Or let's say that's what we're thinking. I should go back to work. So I know that's where I need to be. But underneath that should is a whole bunch of feelings because that's not perhaps how you really feel. It's just the expectation you're putting on yourself that you should feel that way.
Mhm.
So you
Mhm.
want to know what's actually underneath there. Because if we can sense and know what's underneath there, that might actually help us cross the threshold better
Mhm.
and also allow others to cross thresholds um, better,
Yeah.
given their freedom, right? And I want to expand on that. I said, given their freedom, but what I mean is their freedom to be a person and have the feelings that they have the responses that they have, versus all of us maybe saying, like, let's take one, we should all be back in our offices. It's just not a helpful statement, or it's one that's trying to control an outcome we can't control at all, and doesn't really necessarily let us operate and live in the reality that we're in.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that, thank you for clarifying, because I think that is so helpful. Instead of using the word should, which raises an expectation or sets an expectation, let's talk about why that expectation is even there, because then we can really work on, um, we can work on it.
Yes.
So, should I go back to work or I should go back to the office? Well, that might be the expectation that I place on myself. But the reality is that underlying there may be a lot of fear, a lot of fear of the unknown, that trepidation, hesitation. Um, Now, what about if we say, oh, they should, and you kind of touched on it, but what happens, or what is a helpful situation for us, or a helpful frame of mind when we start saying, well, they should be doing this, or so and so should be doing that?
Yeah. Just boy, it's so easy to say and tempting because one, I think that let's just hold it with all things in tenderness and gentleness of awareness, right? Of I really want someone to act a certain way.
Mm,
And I think it's helpful to remember what you actually control,
mm,
which is your own person, your own thoughts, your own feelings. And then give that in that little when we hear ourselves say, they should just, we can go, what am I actually feeling? And that I'm probably trying to displace onto them.
mm,
Because if they were doing what they should be doing, then I could do what I want to be doing.
mm,
And that really is kind of a recipe for nothing happening except
mm,
building up anger and maybe resentment in us.
mm.
How would you say it? What would you add to that?
Oh, I went to a real life example, or trying to apply it to a real life example, and thinking about, so if I decided this a given Sunday that I wanted to take the step and cross the threshold and go to church for in-person worship, and then attend one of the after worship social hours in the parking lot.
Mhm.
So I've made that choice and I'm going to do it, but I haven't, this is my first time. I haven't done any of that um, since COVID.
Mm.
Um, and so I might have some expectations. I'm going to go alone. It's just me. And I walk into this situation or this group of people that I don't know very well. And I'm already feeling awkward, and I am truthfully more of an introvert and more shy, so I'm not the one to come into a group and say, hey, I'm here. So I'm already feeling awkward and shy about it. And and then if I'm not, um anyway, so then I can see myself say, well, this should be different. I should feel differently, or these people should receive me or welcome me differently, more warmly.
Mhm.
And how that can then, I'm setting up an expectation.
Right. And so then when we all walk into those situations, and we all do, and I think that one it just says, yes, it names the time and what's so familiar to us, that feeling. If we would give ourselves a little bit of that space, or let's invite ourselves to have a little space at that should, to feel what's underneath that. And I think that's helpful to be able to feel what's underneath that. And you were already describing, oh wait, I'm shy. This is the first time I've done this. I want to connect with people. I want to feel seen and known. Um, and then I was hoping it would happen a certain way. And when it doesn't, then we are disappointed. But I think it's helpful to know, well, that's what I was hoping for.
Yes.
And to name what we were hoping for, and then be able to go, okay, how can I then direct that energy, which pops up into the they should have been nicer to me. I
Mm,
have had those thoughts, right? When you walk in and you're like, well, dang, gosh, I thought they would be more friendly. They're church people. Right. But instead of letting all my energy go to that and disappointment and how someone else acts, be able to name, I was really hoping I
mm,
might meet someone new, and I can give that energy to what's another way I could walk into that. And then maybe my energy could be more directed into, you know what, I think I'll call someone that I know or want to know. I know enough to go, do you want to sign up to do this one together? Right? You can direct yourself into what will actually help rather than living in this, all the shoulds,
yeah,
which don't give you any actual feet on the ground as you are crossing these thresholds. It's
right.
almost like you
Oh,
stay
and
pinned.
absolutely. And I'm sorry, I just cut you off at the end because I just want to say I think that's so helpful, because when we start to think of the what can I do, it's then constructive thinking
Yes.
rather than the deconstructive thinking, which is, oh, I'm just going to write this off. Like I'm not going to, and we're shutting doors then.
Right. I'm
But
never coming again.
Mhm. Right, right. Oh, so that's so very helpful, that we could reorient our thinking just in that moment and say, okay, what can I do? Um,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. But yes, what can I do? And I love that idea of the reorientation because it is just allowing yourself to step back a little bit, um, to recognize how you're really feeling. I think there's another, I want to bring this up with the should language because it's just so easy to come by. And it's because we have high expectations for ourselves, maybe. And here, I want to actually share a quote to you from Dallas Willard, and you'll get why it's connected in a moment, even though it may not seem like it is. But here, I want to share this with you. He says at one point, I'm to pray for what concerns me. Many people have found prayer impossible because they thought they should only pray for wonderful remote needs they actually had little or no interest in or even knowledge of. Prayer simply dies from efforts to pray about good things that honestly do not matter to us. The way to get to meaningful prayer for those good things is to start by praying for what we are truly interested in. The circle of our interests will inevitably grow in the largeness of God's love. What I love there is the description of share with God, and this is part of the shoulds, what's underneath all the shoulds. How do you actually feel? What is actually of concern to you? Because when we live in the shoulds, like, okay, I'm going to pray, oh, thank you, God, for your grace, which meets everything. You're most wonderful. You always provide for us. But maybe, do you see how I tried to pull it out into larger language that wasn't necessarily this? Go ahead and get really elemental. Lord, I am going into this social hour. I have high expectations because I feel lonely. Help me, right? That we can actually live and pray in that. Um, my gracious, we have a really good God, and we know that, and we can get ourselves tied up in little knots that we need to be different or think better. We can't have such thoughts of, I'm shy, whatever it might be, right? Does that make sense? That,
Yes, not to get stuck in those thoughts, whether they are thoughts about ourselves or just big thoughts about God, rather than the personal and that intimate. So I, I hear your both challenge and a challenge to us and encouragement to get down to the elemental and say what really matters, like what is really going on in our hearts. Get away from that standards or expectations or the shoulds and really name the this is what's happening. God,
yes,
help me in that.
yes, help me in that. And
Mhm.
then I think that puts our feet on the path and of crossing those thresholds in the manner that we are hoping. And here I'm going to say the word that we wish we could be, should we think we should be. But when we start with the shoulds, we can't get there from
Yeah.
there. But if we give the reality, that intimate, what's really concerning us, we can step more easily on that path, I think. So if you want to, there's one scripture, I know many of you know it by heart, even in Psalm 139, but it's just that invitation: search me, God, know my heart, know my anxious thoughts, see if there's any offensive way in me, lead me in the way everlasting. And this is, let me let go of the shoulds and to be in the what is, reflect honestly about the hopes, and lean into that. Lean into the God who is with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Pastor Susan, for bringing that to us. This is such a relevant conversation and topic for all of us who are deciding which thresholds we want to cross and which ones we don't want to cross. And that prayer that God is the one who can search us, who could know us, and then who can lead us. So thank you. For all of you who are listening, we hope deeply that you will take care until next time. Bye.